Welcome to the Progressive Patriots podcast, a Lux Media production. Recording is going. There's definitely a lot more going on that I wasn't able to get. I also had a bit of a busy day as well. But I do want to later, at some other point, bring up there's an election in Poland where the left coalition reclaimed parliament from the Diet fascist. They called themselves like Justice and something Party, Justice and Law or something.
Yeah. So I served quite a bit in Poland while I was still on active back in mostly 2016, 2017. Very interesting political posture over there. A lot of their kind of, and maybe we can save this discussion for when we get into it. Unless, are we like already rolling? Or
Yeah,
how does it?
yeah, we're live at the moment.
Yeah, we're live.
Oh, okay. Well, shit. So I think, great. So I think that there's kind of some really interesting parallels between like the Polish political situation and certainly the way that Polish political narratives mirror our own. One of the biggest parallels that I noticed while I was over there is sort of like this constant threat of invasion narrative. Ironically, I would say that Poland has a much more legitimate basis for that, but it still gets used in the same way. Here in the United States, oftentimes political narratives on the right get kind of formed around this idea of, this very big, dangerous world where we're being beset on all sides. We've got an invasion happening at the borders, oftentimes like the language they like to use to describe what is in fact just a badly mismanaged, outdated system of, both immigration and just international commerce. But that hyperbolic language is used for a reason, right? It's to get people riled up and put into a fearful place where they feel like they have to either be paralyzed into submission and do absolutely nothing. That kind of benefits the status quo for the people who are already well served by the system, or B, absolutely makes them feel like they have to make this sort of like national defense based decision, where maybe they're not making decisions based on their kindest intentions. They'll justify things like mining on sacred lands, or
separating kids from their parents.
Yeah, exactly. People will accept these just absolute atrocities if it's done in the name of national defense that I don't think that anybody normally would. So Poland has kind of a similar situation happening over there, both because of, many, many displaced peoples coming from the Middle East, coming from all over the place, but also because they share a land border with Belarus, and on one side, and then on the other side, they have the Russian military enclave of Kaliningrad, where there are hundreds of thousands of Russian troops, and they have a historic memory of being invaded and conquered and exploited and abused by their neighbors for millennia, So it's really a big part of the Polish consciousness to kind of have this, sort of well-founded sometimes fear of invasion and very defense-oriented posture. So it makes them, unfortunately, ripe for exploitation by fascists who want to consolidate power, and a lot of the same ways that they try and do that here in the United States political context, they do there as well. They keep things based in this idea of a traditional nuclear family and have very restrictive gender roles, and that's kind of like what they try and purvey.
That was my experience also with when I was in Kosovo. I served in a joint Romanian United States capacity, and then we served alongside a Polish Ukrainian joint battalion, which was a really interesting experience, simply because I had never been exposed to either of those cultures before. And the level of cooperation, like I said, it was a joint battalion. The level of cooperation between those two countries at that time when I was there was something that was, I mean, you couldn't distinguish, like they were one unit, you know what I mean? There was no distinguishing line.
Very
between
similar histories, though. It's like
yeah, exactly.
we both
very
got
similar
boned by the
histories.
Russians, so let's be friends.
Boned hard by the
Yeah,
Russians. Let's
very.
be real. One thing I noticed though is that a lot of them were deeply conservative. I think a lot of it goes back to like what Derek was saying with the nuclear family, with this idea of what is a correct family, quote unquote. I think that lends itself
Traditional
to some of the
masculinity. What do men do? What do women do? Women are in the kitchen or taking care of kids.
Definitely. I think that kind of lends itself to why they have kind of a pervasive, I mean, not solely, but it lends itself to why they have kind of a pervasive kind of sense of toxic masculinity across the country.
Well, I wouldn't even say that it's across the country. Honestly, like I spent times in more metropolitan areas in Poland anyway. Spent a good amount of time in Łódź, Warsaw. And I would say as a nation and like their national policy posture, Poland is still like a Western democracy, I would say head and shoulders above the United States in a lot of important ways, just in terms of like what human rights you can expect to be kind of kind of respected. Now, granted, like when you're in like more rural areas, little villages, and certainly within the microcosm of the military units I was engaging with, I would say those probably trend conservative in similar ways that the U.S. military does too. Got along with them great, but then when you have kind of like the you still have like, you know, the person-to-person interactions with the average enlisted guys, especially. And it's funny because like in a lot of the ways that I think poverty is a big driver for people to join the U.S. military to a much greater extent than, you know, patriotism or nationalism or any of these kind of like grand high-minded ideas about freedom and justice and democracy and all that stuff. In Poland, they pay their enlisted service members absolute shit, like so much worse than ours. They're really mostly getting paid in room and board on the junior enlisted side, and they don't have any guarantee of, you know, moving their way up through the ranks. Like you can be a private for 20 years in Poland.
I heard that from the Romanians as well. My counterpart was a Romanian sergeant major, and the dude was just an amazing person, but like I got to talking to him and he had been everywhere. And I'm like, well, why haven't you retired yet? And he's like, well, I'm still saving up. They don't have retirement like we do. And I think that's pensions, anything like that. So I think it's something we take for granted in the American military system. Definitely.
Yeah. I don't think the conservative diaspora of our military understands just how socialized their lifestyle is.
100%.
They 100%. Absolutely do not get it. But okay, so actually, this is a perfect time. I want to do a formal introduction.
Hey.
Yep. This is Progressive Patriots. My name is Leo. I'm joined today by Moises and Derek, who you just heard having an excellent conversation on how it is over with our homies in Europe. This is the international edition. I wanted to do this one more than the US version, to be honest with you. I just have more interest in it, but regardless, they're both really important to have, so I'm really glad that we got to kick this off. Let's see. It is currently about 15:45 on October 18th. So, given how quickly the shit in Israel-Palestine is going, you know, things probably will be different by the time you hear this. So,
We kind of jumped right into conversation, but I think in some ways, having Moises and I as your co-panelists for talking about this, that we're in some ways kind of uniquely qualified. But I was thinking maybe Moises, if you want to share kind of like your background and bona fides and your travels and things, and kind of where your perspective comes from as we're talking about international affairs and everything. Of course, Leo can do his editing now.
Yeah, I can cut this to the beginning.
Yeah.
So definitely my background is in human intelligence collection and analysis. So a lot of my job when I was in the military was dealing with confidential informants and talking to people who were giving us that on the ground from the people in the room perspective. I served in Kosovo in Eastern Europe. I was there when they declared independence from Serbia unilaterally in 2008. I spent a lot of time in Germany training other soldiers to do this job. And just, like my friend Derek here, DLI, the Defense Language Institute, being exposed to native speakers of not only Arabic, that we were both sent to DLI to go learn, but like also while you're there, you are interacting with, you might bump into the teachers who teach Korean, teach Chinese, or, there's a multicultural little fair that they do for the food, and you get to go around and like experience cultures. So I think there's a very eye-opening experience that happens when you join the military and you expect to see one thing, and then you go towards the intelligence linguist side and you're like, oh wait, cool, there's this entire side of the world that I'm getting to experience that I wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. But like for me, that's what makes me so passionate about international news and keeping track of things, just to make sure that people here don't overlook things that are happening other places, because sometimes and most of the times it's just as important to what's going on everyday American life.
Why are all these Venezuelans coming to the U.S.? I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. They have no idea. Of course you don't fucking
understand.
Yeah, because they don't understand the how many people don't understand our own political system, let alone the political systems of other countries? It's just, I mean, I don't want to be nihilistic, but like there's a certain amount of multiculturalism or a level of multiculturalism that you're never going to get to, but like we are failing at the very base.
Derek, a little bit from you as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. First, I gotta say, like with Moises's last comment, I'm drawn back to like because we're also just like kind of fucking politico wonk idiots that are addicted to news and politics and just following kind of like the horse race that is elections and kind of like really the sports fandom that is the rest of politics. So that for some reason that made me think of the moment where the one of former President Trump's former secretaries of state, Mike Pompeo, asked this reporter from NPR to find Ukraine on an unmarked map after asking some, completely, I would say like harmless question about at that point, the administration's position on things that were happening in Ukraine. And this is back in, I don't know, 2018, maybe 2019. And then what kills me is Mike Pompeo came back and furnished an unmarked map of Europe, like a map that did not have country names on it, and like tried to test this NPR like foreign relations correspondent of all things. Like if anybody can find fucking
who covers
Ukraine
Russia,
on
Ukraine, I bet.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
my
It's like,
God.
oh, buddy, you're really doubling down on your on the big feelings that have been hurt inside you by this reporter that asked you to do your job. Anyway, so before I chase that rabbit any further, you know, I would say ever since I was pretty young, I really loved the idea of being kind of a global citizen. You know, I didn't have the privilege of doing a ton of international travel or anything when I was real little, but when I was 16, I saved up a bunch of money and sold all my stuff to go do a foreign exchange to Germany. And while I was in Germany for my essentially my whole junior year of high school, it was completely eye-opening. I mean, for one, I lived immersively. I learned the language by living with a German family, going to a German school. And then I was also just so fortunate that this family I lived with was a very worldly, multicultural family. They were importers. So they were a couple of hippies who had spent the 70s traveling through India and Chile and Mexico and Thailand, and went all these different places, made a bunch of friends, and their identities were very heavily informed by their travel. And so we would have friends coming in from Northern Africa would come and stay at our house for a weekend, and I get to stay up into the early hours of the morning, drinking tea with these guys, sometimes beer if I was well behaved, which I rarely was. Still rarely am, for better or worse. But really got to get the perspectives of all of these kind of global citizens, these very worldly people who are traveling all over the place, in part to sell their wares, but also in part just because it was the way they kind of oriented themselves to the world. That, the place that they were born did not really define them. Really, it was more their feelings about the world and their feelings about other people and their desire to learn and experience and see as much as they possibly could with this precious little time that we all have on this world. And that really deeply impacted me. So even after I came back home, I don't know, I couldn't really come back into the headspace of living in this small town and not really giving a fuck what happens outside of it. So from that point on, I started to really kind of care about current events. I ended up joining the Army to kind of start my adventure. And then I served as an Arabic linguist as well, but rather than a human intelligence collector, I was a signals intelligence collector. So that entailed all sorts of different fun secrets and tradecraft and stuff. But in the course of that, I was also stationed overseas and got to spend some time in Northern Africa, Morocco, and Eastern Europe quite a bit. Ran lots of missions focused on the Russian target set out of Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Czechia, formerly Czech Republic, formerly Czechoslovakia. Just really loved it. I had a lot of great opportunities to interact with foreign military members. As we were kind of speaking about earlier, what the dynamics were like, kind of talking to some of the Polish soldiers. Very different culture there in some ways, but still with some really strong parallels, because at the end of the day, democracies are vulnerable to a lot of the same dirty, rotten fascist tricks, just like they are here. So yeah, that was very formative, and just as I think a function of being the soul swinging dick in my entire company who could speak German, I ended up having to be kind of the translator and ambassador and ambulance driver and guy who bails people out of jail on a pretty regular basis. So I would get woken up at the on most Saturdays and unfortunately many Sunday nights as well, as the guy on call to speak to the Polizei. So my German's pretty good. If I could go back and do it a little bit differently, I might not have volunteered how good my German was. But like Moises talked about, both of us spent close to 2 years. The course itself is 18 months, but close to 2 years at the Defense Language Institute at the Presidio of Monterey in California, which is the Department of Defense's premier language school. It's where we train all of our different variety of 3-letter agency spooks and all of our service agency interpreters, linguists, eavesdroppers, and interrogators. And he's absolutely right. You over the course of that time, you spend something like 8 hours a day in a classroom, very, very small class sizes. It'd be like myself and between 3 and 5 other students from all sorts of different services, and one native-born instructor. So I had teachers, professors who were Palestinian, who were Moroccan, who were Egyptian, who were Saudi, who were Syrian, Lebanese, all over the Arab world, and really got to forge really strong bonds with a lot of those people. And as you do that, one of the practical tasks that you have to do on a daily basis is to practice speaking, and to practice reading, and to practice listening. And for those of us who already really, really struggle to ever shut the fuck up, like myself and Moises, we're already pretty well practiced in speaking. So for us, it's largely like a language thing. But a lot of the other students, could be coming from backgrounds of being like a little bit shy and really have their own sort of coming of age in terms of really learning how to make a daily practice out of reading things like the news, and thinking about what is actually happening and having conversations. Sometimes, especially at the beginning of the course, you've got a very, very limited vocabulary to work with. So you talk about yourself a lot, and you ask a lot of basic questions, getting to know these people. So, I mean, of my dozen or so professors while I was there, I could tell you so much about each of the places they grew up, their families, their offspring, their hobbies, all of these things that you learn to talk about in the target language. You're also having like genuine one-on-one conversations with all of these people who have such a close proximity to, and such at times, a really truly heartbreaking proximity to a lot of the pain and devastation and war that has been sown throughout the region, largely by outside imperialist actors. So I guess all of that is to say that even as Americans, Moises and I have grappled with the kind of dynamics of the Middle East more even than a lot of soldiers do. Because for us, it's not just like we went and spent like a shitty vacation to go do the war and then come back home. It's really been a part of our lives before and after and during all of that. So I think about them all the time. I've reached out to old professors and fellow classmates.
Oh, definitely, dude. I mean, I don't talk about this a lot, but of course I was a different person. I was like 19 at the time. I just about converted to Islam when I was there.
Yeah.
It was an eye-opening experience for me, life-changing, to experience another culture so intimately, I think is the best way to put it, because you really do, like, you almost see them as aunts and uncles.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, they're just they they transcend the teacher-student relationship because you spend so much time learning from them, and it really leaves a lot of us changed. And it goes to speak that so many of us work in organizing, and so many of us graduates from DLI go on to do community work and work in politics and in government, because I think a lot of that desire to see the change in the world is instilled in us.
Absolutely.
I don't think I have a story that's nearly that cool to compare to either of yours. Oh man, like I think Derek, you had mentioned earlier how when we were talking about like the Polish or like your other countries' military pay stuff, how it's not good, not even remotely good. I grew up pretty poor, so this was military was kind of the only option I had. In that, I ended up getting put into PSYOP, psychological operations. I know a lot of people like to throw that word around like they know what it means, but there's a lot more to it. I always try to easily, the way that I try to really make it simple, to simplify it, is calling it just military marketing, which I suppose it works to a degree, but in that, as you learn how to do it, you also learn how to recognize the signs of it, or like different elements of people trying to sway opinions one way or another with sometimes pretty subtle wording. And like that's what drove me to doing this media thing. Like I started this doing boxing, that is like my love. I love boxing. It's my favorite sport.
Which I still need to jump in and chat with you about.
Yeah. Yeah, I can have you onto the boxing show if you want.
Definitely.
So I started with that, and then I was thinking about it. Like, as much as I love boxing, and I don't care how niche it is, I'm going to keep doing it. I started thinking, like, the media landscape is not, to me, it's not satisfactory. This isn't. I wouldn't want somebody to look at this and think that this is accurate information, because it really isn't. It's a lot of incomplete stories or lies by omission. So here I am, trying to use my dark powers for good.
It's funny that you put it that way, because that's the same feeling I have with my human intelligence skills.
Yeah,
it's like this dark tools. I have a certain set of skills.
I went to. It was a short course. I think it was only like a month long, but it was run by counter intel guys, and it was like just how to collect information without seeming like you're collecting information.
Oh, fun times.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was that. That as well is another thing where I got to use my. I don't want to be a Sith anymore. I gotta start using my powers for good. No correct the records because it's our first one. Let's see. I wanted to do something really quick. It was a while back, but there's a high-speed rail that is going live. I think at this point it already is, but they're extending a free rides for everybody just so they could get accustomed to it in Indonesia. And the thing about this is soft power. This is being built and in large part funded by the Chinese. And I don't know, it really seems like we're trying to build up our posture in the Asia Pacific region, specifically with like Vietnam, Philippines. Philippines have been traditionally our ally anyway, but with Vietnam, a little bit of a troubled history. India, I mean, obviously, if you're not with one, you're kind of with the other. Don't really have a lot of options. And we're also bolstering Australia as well with the nuclear-powered subs, I should say.
That we pissed off the French about.
Yeah, we did. I had that on there.
Oh.
They were really close to sealing the deal.
Yeah, China's kind of doing this all over, though.
Yes, they are. I have more
I think
stories
this
of
is
China doing this.
this is very much a state directive. I
Yeah,
think for
it is.
them is kind of gain that soft power where they have more political influence. Because I think they're, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they're doing the same thing in like Southeast Africa as well.
All over
Right.
Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind
So
of like a much more, I think, far-sighted sort of strategic posture
Yeah.
that China takes compared to the way that we do. Like the sort of like the operating ethic behind this is they have a fully planned economy, right? So they're looking at where is the entirety of our supply chain coming from, and where is the entirety of our consumer base coming from, and are there bottlenecks in both that supply chain and that consumer base, just based on the economies of places that we do business with. So for them, they invested something like $7+ billion in this project you're talking, right? Which is a funny number because it's about the total investment projected, I believe, required to build like the United States southern border wall that Trump was like tooting his horn about for the entirety of his presidency, right? And I'm not even making the case that there's no economic output to, say, a border wall project, because that is, I mean, they're still contracting that out to U.S. and probably some Mexican companies as well to do that big infrastructure project. But look at what the difference in infrastructure is. You have a one-time investment in making a big useless fucking wall that also causes a whole bunch of other problems, both in like the environment and in the humanitarian situation that comes out of that. And you can spend the same amount of money to create a high-speed rail that gets people more involved in the economy, more mobile, a more agile workforce. It's bringing people in from rural areas. It's bringing people out to the places that work needs to happen.
creating jobs.
Yeah.
Not even just creating jobs. Like it can absolutely
It
be
makes the
arranged
country
in
a
such a way
smaller
that it pays
place.
for itself. Yeah, it makes the country a smaller place. It makes communities more interconnected. And in kind of like the immediate term, it also ingratiates this foreign country to China in a lot of meaningful ways. So really, really stark contrast there. Just the ways that you can use, as diplomats and as statesmen, ways that you can use those funds to invest in either pandering to your base, for a one-time liability that you then have to maintain until it becomes a tourist attraction, when the Great Wall of America is a place that people can take selfies 1,000 years from now, versus something that is providing immediate vital infrastructure and bringing economies and bringing people into the 21st century. But yeah, the contrast could not be greater.
So here's my kind of thing on this. So I live about an hour away from the largest rail yard in the world, Bailey Yard. I know a lot of people that work for Union Pacific Railroad. My wife's family worked for Union Pacific Railroad for years and years, stuff like that. America does not give a fuck about its transit system and its trains. And that's one of the saddest things I think I have ever seen. I have a major Union Pacific Railroad cargo line that goes by my house, right through our town. And these rails, the cars, the everything they're ancient. There's no plans to modernize. Like there's this lag in a country that, championed railroad, right? And we championed this, everybody, all American kids are taught in school that we, the great Continental Railroad and the Golden Spike, right? Golden Spike Tower is in North Platte, Nebraska. That's what I'm talking about. You can go see the site or whatever where they did that. But then we just kind of did nothing. And that, to me, is just an absolute fucking shame. Because think about where we could be as a country and where we could be, like, if we were a global leader in not only trains, but like what China's doing. What if instead of spending all this money to build a border wall, what if we were interconnecting high-speed rail to connect from like New York City all the way down to like Argentina?
Well, and like this is what's so fucked up about it, right? Is because China has spent the last 20 years spending trillions, not billions, but trillions of dollars in workforce development and infrastructure, so that they can move people around, working class people around, fairly seamlessly between a tremendous landmass in which you've got, you know, cities, multiple cities, dozens of cities the size and population of Los Angeles. Like, a lot of Americans hadn't heard of the city of Wuhan prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Wuhan is like the size and population of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's huge.
It is
an absolutely
fucking
massive
huge.
city.
Yeah, and they've got that process so down because they've spent the entire time and roughly comparable funds that we've spent these last 20 years engaging in wars in foreign countries, where we're just
Spinning wheels.
Ungodly amounts of money and blood, both American and otherwise, just to enrich a few major suppliers of those instruments of death. So at the same time, our adversary, our opponent, our competition, if you want to look at them that way, in China, have spent a lot of that same time and money really building themselves up. So much so that they can now fairly easily export infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes this is not even just like a Chinese appropriation in which they're just outlaying $7 billion.
They send labor and supplies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything that's needed to make this happen.
Chinese firms are also operating and constructing and maintaining these things. So
Meanwhile, in Aurora, Colorado, like 3 days ago, okay, a railway bridge collapsed. A 65-year-old rust bucket collapsed, killing 2 people, injuring others, and blocking off a part of I-25 that they don't know how many weeks it's going to be until they can reopen it.
Exactly. And this is what's such bullshit about it. And like, one of the places that I really, you know, as a veteran, I feel like there are so many different ways that we can talk about the cost of war, right? I mean, oftentimes it gets talked about in terms of the human toll, both on the many victims of war, and sometimes it gets talked about in terms of dollars and cents. I think one thing that we really don't talk nearly enough about, though, is the opportunity cost of war.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
It's zero sum. There is only so many hours a day, days in a week, weeks in a month, months in a year, and the years have gone by. And as our body politic has only really been able to agree on a couple of things, which is mostly the continuation of our government with more and more frequent punctuations to that, and the continued funding of our military, which is largely privatized. You know, this is what it's wrought. You know, we've got crumbling infrastructure.
East Palestine
that we have
is a very clear example of that.
Absolutely. And so then that results in second and third order consequences all around the world because of that privatized militarization.
Oh, absolutely. And yet, not to side with Jim Jordan, because fuck that guy. But Jim Jordan was getting criticized in the speaker's race that's currently going on in the U.S. side for proposing a 1% budget cut to defense spending.
1%, and he's getting roasted for that?
He was getting roasted for that.
Oh,
absolutely getting roasted.
I love when I agree. I end up like agreeing with right wingers for like completely different reasons.
Oh, exactly.
I just saw campaign text message from I think Vote Vets or something like that, and it was quoting Donald Trump, mainly to like rage bait people into making a donation, right? And they're saying it was something like, I've never seen a more stupid group of losers in my entire life, when talking about like a group of senior military officers. And I thought about it, like, yeah, senior military officers are some of the
Is he wrong though?
that I've ever met.
I think when there's an adage,
like, right.
there's an adage going around that's been going around lately. It's the most horrible person you know just made a great point.
Yeah. I know. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Okay, I pulled out the quote is, some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. That's how Trump described some of our most senior military officers on Monday. And you know what? God bless him. I hope he ends up in fucking the worst prison in the United States. I hope they open up the Donald J. Trump Memorial Spider Pit isolation chamber for him.
Spider pit?
Yeah.
No. It's got to be
However, comma, he is right. Those are some of the dumbest people I've met in my life as well. So
no, he's like
who says you
terrified
can't
of
fight
Shark
comedy?
Week. He was terrified of Shark Week, so it's got to be like a cell surrounded by like an aquarium.
Oh, no.
Oh my God! You know what? It's really sad how much of our discussion, even about the international stage, turns back to like what we could be, like what we wish America could portray on the world stage. You know what I mean?
Buddy,
Versus
those are my
what
favorite
we're.
conversations. I think that's the hope and vision that our political narratives and our discussion as a society really lacks. We have to argue so much over just, one, the truth, like what
Basic
is actually happening, and then two, like the goal lines for what gets accomplished in the highest halls of government have moved, basically retreated all the way back to the starting line. Like, we're more than 14, 15 plus months into this congressional term, and we don't even have a speaker right now.
So contrast that to.
Right, I'm sorry. Rather, this last Congress just started back in
Yeah.
the year. But look,
So,
it's October still.
Yeah. So contrast that to the communist 5-year plan we were just talking about, where they have everything planned out to the detail, what they're going to do with their economy and all that. And it makes us look a little dumb sometimes. I'm not advocating for the Chinese Communist Party, because I think they're a dictatorship under the guise of communism.
Sure.
But like, you gotta admit that there is a certain desirability to having everyone in your country be on the same page, that we desperately need in this country. We need to reach for, because I think so much of the divisiveness and stuff is kind of what lends itself to us being stuck in the mud and not being able to move forward. Whereas they, for better or for worse, are like, fuck it, this is what we're doing. They can make those decisions.
Yeah, and I don't see the Chinese system through, any more rose-colored glasses than I do about the American system. The Chinese system is communist to the same extent that the American system is actually a democratic republic.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Like
when they
both of them
switch
are largely branding within like their own very deeply flawed and compromised capitalist systems.
Their BS. What is it? One country, two systems, or whatever. What it
With
was.
Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, with Hong Kong and technically with China, if you really look at it, because
Taiwan?
they merged. Just mainland China.
Oh,
they're a very combo a combination communist state with an open market, which is just
That's kind of weird.
an oxymoron. But it's there's no reality to the communist state. Like, there's, as much as the Republicans want to jump on this like Chinese Communist Party, it's really just the Chinese dictatorship.
Well, yeah, look, the way that I see it is the Chinese economy is a planned economy. Our economy is also a planned economy. The difference is that our economy is planned by unelected corporate leaders that we don't really have any kind of like name or face to. And their plan is kind of just like built around fuck you, I got mine, and if we fail, then the elected officials that we have on retainer essentially are going to bail us out anyways. The biggest distinction with the Chinese system is that although they're similarly compromised, they still have this kind of big umbrella idea of the state, and a lot of their choices are made in the pursuit of advancing the state's interest, as opposed to the individual competing interests of leaders in corporate America. But yeah, both of them not great.
Does that go back to a sense, and this is like the history nerd in me, but does that go back in a sense to like the idea of like a national identity that they have, and we as a younger country maybe haven't gotten to yet?
I think that's such an interesting conversation to have, and a way that I often see it framed, and I wonder what you guys think about it too, is collectivist national identities versus individualist national identities. And I think in the United States, the way that looks is there's this idea that the United States and all of her institutions, economic systems, opportunities, barriers, whatever, are largely about how you as an individual move through it and make or lose your fortunes. And really your goal to live your American dream is, to build your business, build your empire, build your brand, make your art, whatever, get a bunch of money, and then when you die, leave it to your offspring. Or if you're a really stand-up guy or gal, maybe you start a charitable foundation and, they name a theater or a museum or something after you. Whereas in China, it's a little bit more of a collectivist society where a lot of your value in society and your esteem in society, and even your self-esteem, comes from
contribution.
What quality of a citizen you are. Yeah, what are you contributing? Yeah, exactly. And for you to gain and achieve at the expense of society is something
that's immoral. Like a very sin.
And looked at really badly. Whereas in the United States, there are so many people that are like, hey,
Donald Trump sees those people as suckers.
Yeah, if you can get away with not paying taxes, then fuck yeah, you got yours. Good job, buddy. Like that would never fly in China, I feel.
Right, like here, it's almost seen as a good thing to step on people to get up, to step up higher. That was something that I experienced, actually. That's something that I learned was very pervasive in Pashtun culture in Afghanistan, which is an awesome segue to the earthquake that happened in Afghanistan. I want to say about a week and a half ago. It was an estimated about 2,400 dead. I haven't checked if that number's gone up. It probably has. This was just a little bit northwest of Herat. And so Afghanistan, being what it is, doesn't necessarily have a healthcare system or any kind of infrastructure to make healthcare happen. So they've been depending on foreign aid for the longest time. I expect most of that when we were ravaging it. But once the Taliban took over again, a lot of that foreign aid was cut, mostly because people weren't allowed to go in anymore.
Yeah.
So,
but isn't this the second earthquake?
Yes. Yeah. So there's about somewhere between 1.7 to 2 million displaced people that fled to Pakistan. And I heard today that the Pakistani government is now they're issuing bounties basically to find refugees, report them to the authorities, or find people who are helping refugees and report them to the authorities so they can be sent back. Their deadline is November 1st to get out before they're going to be punished before they're sent away.
Well, first of all, I wish we had time for a conversation just about shifting to a bounty-based system of law enforcement. I don't think it would actually be appreciably worse than what we're doing now. Yeah, than when most places have going on. Add like a little bit of a witch hunt kind of dynamic to.
Yeah, just make up whatever. Make the rules so that someone you don't like is wrong.
Exactly.
But okay.
How far are we from a video game?
Yes.
Yeah. Little bit of levity there for the backdrop of
it's a really terrible event.
Yeah.
Really absolutely devastating. And you know, again, looking at this through kind of a veteran lens, what I'm drawn to is looking at this as part of the full cost of our intervention, our decades-long war, and really, you know, closer to 4-5 decades-long foreign intervention and investment in destabilizing Afghanistan. You know, if we look at it just from today, and our analysis doesn't go any further than, well, the Taliban are in power and they're very bad guys, so nobody should help them, and nobody
all
should...
of Afghanistan is shit because the Taliban are in charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If your analysis stops there, then there's a little bit of a through line here to sort of like the fascist mindset we talked about that took hold in Poland and has taken hold here in the United States and is often used to advance just really horrendous, inhumane policy positions, right? All of that is based in kind of this idea that some human beings on this planet are more or less deserving of having a safe and dignified life. I fundamentally reject that premise. You know,
Same. Absolutely.
That's what's been making the whole situation in Gaza really difficult. Is
absolutely
more like, obviously it's horrible what's happening to the people there. I'm not trying to discount that, but what's really not making me sad about it, but what's really making me angry is seeing people just not care. Very simply, don't care about the Palestinians at all.
Yeah. I read a really interesting quote, and I wish I could find who it was to attribute it. It was on Twitter, or X. Excuse me, X. X. Yeah, you got to do it dramatically. But I saw a quote that said, "If you have to ask whose children are dead, you're part of the problem." And I think that has been so much of the issue, has been the tendency of media to, I don't want to say overplay, because again, horrible things happened in Israel.
Yeah.
And you don't want to like minimize that to whatever extent.
Sure.
But like there are people who are capitalizing on it. Using it.
And part of that, I think,
propagandizing it.
Yeah. Part of that, I think, is trying to have like the most charitable lens possible here, right? I think part of the problem is that for those in the media, they often have pressure to come up with a story that has a clear beginning, middle, and cliffhanger, a protagonist and an antagonist. The reason for that is because that's a lot of the way that is easiest and most digestible for us as human beings to understand an event that happens. we seek that. We ask for that kind of resolution,
Yeah.
that pretty little bow on top. Like, well, I want to understand basically what happened.
And they live
when it
happily
happened.
ever after.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
They seek the narrative. Perfect
or at
narrative.
least like for you to take away some kind of understanding of like who the good guy is, who the bad guy is. But the reality is there is no cosmic thread through the universe that is pulling us towards that structure. That is a narrative structure that just serves those who are in the business of telling stories. In reality, that's not exactly what it's like.
Yeah, protagonist and antagonist might be the same person.
Sure.
Like, you never know. Like it's and I think part of to kind of track this back to the Afghanistan and to the Israel story, kind of linking it through. So what do you think of? All right. So some of the criticism before on aid that has been given to the Afghanis has been that the Taliban is in control of the aid and doesn't distribute it appropriately with the correct amount of speed, that the aid is wasted, it's sitting around, it's not handled correctly, right? And I see the same criticism now from the Israeli side on Gaza as to why they won't provide certain amounts or certain kinds of aid, because they say that, it's been proven that the
Hamas takes it.
Hamas fighters, that they're going to come take it. So like, I know it has happened in both places, right? But like, how much legitimacy does that have to withholding aid?
Because we're talking about aid, I feel like it's useful, or at least maybe a little bit instructive, to quantify things. So since the current or most recent kind of throes of U.S. intervention started in Afghanistan, we've invested something like along the order of $150 billion or so in direct aid to the functioning of the Afghan government. That includes the Karzai regime that collapsed, and all of those subsequent and before and during the U.S. occupation. Israel has ongoing aid that it receives to the tune of, something like $3 to $4 billion a year, going back all the way to the post-World War II era. That is, I think, somewhere close to like $300 billion at this point. So between the two nations, one of them has received about twice as much aid as the other. Both of them have been the subject of tremendous profit by both U.S.-based and internationally oriented defense contractors. These are the guys that actually construct the prisons and construct the weapons and construct all of these products that are used for, some of them pretty innocuous. Some of them are like civil projects, like building railroads,
highways,
and building highways,
Yeah.
things like that. Some of them are actually constructing prisons and actually providing things like guns and ammunition that keep these conflicts going and well supplied. So the point I'm trying to get at there is what we're talking about in both cases is foreign aid as a policy decision, and what strings are attached to that, and to what end that they actually get used. Because I personally, I'm actually a proponent of foreign aid in concept. I think that there can be economic benefits. I think that there can be diplomatic benefits. I think that they can promote goodwill and peace, and that oftentimes a lot of social unrest and potential violence are really externalities of the underlying issues of poverty, which results in not having great opportunities for people to go do things that are like more peaceful and productive than engaging in a safe and healthy society where people can live dignified lives. So I along those lines, I'm a huge fan of the idea of, hey, if we, as this insanely wealthy supposedly freedom-loving, enlightened, city on a hill type society, if we see our neighbors who don't have very basic necessities that we know are multipliers when it comes to improving outcomes in society, like having clean drinking water, like having functioning hospitals, like having electricity and roads and schools and all of those basic fundamentals that all human beings need, I say, fuck yeah, sign me up. Invest that money, because that prosperity makes its way all over the place, you know, and it heads off a lot of really scary, sad, unfortunate stuff. Mostly, I would point back to poverty that results in us having things like, you know, civil war and authoritarian regimes and, you know, armed militant groups, because people don't have another way to keep bread on the table. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Isn't that what Pete Buttigieg, his like new Marshall Plan for the Central American republics was about? Was investing in those countries with those types of like civil projects that you were just talking about, so that the people there don't have to come here anymore.
Yeah. My only caveat to that would be, we also need that shit here.
But it's not either or though. You know,
no, it's not. I think we do both.
Yeah,
absolutely do both.
Hell, we could do it just with the savings from not fucking investing a huge amount of our GDP into just bombing poor people into the fucking Stone Age all over the fucking world. 24/7,
crazy idea. Instead of 1%, 2%.
Yeah, it turns out we don't need to create demand for infrastructure projects by blowing up highways and airports. We can stop that. God. There's already enough demand. We can just supply it.
Yeah, it's crazy how bad the infrastructure thing is getting across the country, and people just kind of like, meh. I'm going to drive across this bridge.
That's what I was going to mention, was something that President Biden said today or yesterday, that the U.S. can absolutely afford to continue assisting in the Ukraine war against Russia, and also this supporting Israel against Hamas, and whoever else might try to jump in on their behalf. But
absolutely.
But we can't improve infrastructure. We can't cancel student debt. We can't have Medicare for all, because those things are too expensive.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which is like absolute horseshit. Because,
yes, it's complete
like,
bullshit.
We have currency that is completely imaginary, just enforced by fiat. Like the government makes it, and like it's really not a matter of what we can afford to do. It is what
are our
money
priorities.
Well, not even just that. I would say, like, what are the moneyed interests in our society that are profiting from the way that things are? Who is being aggrandized and empowered by us having paywalls to get to things like healthcare, to get to things like higher education? Who is disincentivized?
Like news.
Yeah, to get news, just to get access to the public good of competent reporting and having, some idea of what the truth is about what's happening. Yeah, what's happening in our country and in our world.
Well, I was told that the border wall is going to cost 2 cans of Diet Coke and a handful of tokens from Chuck E. Cheese, and Mexico's going to pay for them anyway, so it's all good.
Oh my God!
I want to
somebody in my neighborhood believes that shit. It's the saddest fucking statement.
Yeah. Just really quickly, one that I wanted to bring up was a situation that's happening in North Korea. They're supposed to be considered like political refugees when North Koreans escape somehow, typically along the northern border into China. But China's starting to deport them back to North Korea, where they're typically going to be tortured, or at the like best case scenario, like hard labor prison camps. So
labor camp, yeah.
So it's gonna be, it's a really dire situation, and it's about coming up to encroaching on 1,000 North Koreans a week. Yeah,
1,000 a week.
I think. I think it was 1,000 a week when I got it, or 600 a week when I got it, but it's climbing.
That's a lot of people, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's not
It's
a whole
still
lot of
just a
there's
lot of
not a
people.
whole lot of defectors either. So like that number is going to become 0 at some point. And one interest.
So,
oh, go ahead.
So, I mean, something that I'm drawn to here is, I think it's very easy for us to have like knee-jerk reactions to this as like Americans, instead of just as human beings. I think when we hear news like that and we think about it through this like very American lens, we think, oh, what an incredibly fucked up process and procedure that these two inferior governments are imposing on these poor victims of the North Korean regime, which there's definitely truth to. However, looking at it through kind of just like a more human lens, our country is also actively doing a lot of that, to include, people who are detained at the border and then are sent through our own penal system are oftentimes also put in situations where they have no practical alternative to indefinite detention, or basically essentially indefinite detention, because our court system is so backed up and lacks any kind of transparency of process for detained persons who are coming across the border. And then while you're actually in the penal system, so many of the prisons are privatized and infiltrated by these businesses that derive all of their profit from prison labor, which is as close to unpaid labor as you can possibly get. Like they'll give like some hourly pittance of
20
something
cents.
like 10 cents, 20 cents, whatever an hour, just so they can say
they're not slaves.
It's like when your younger sibling has their finger like right next to your eyeball and they're just saying, I'm not touching you. It's like, I'm paying you. I'm not enslaving you. I'm not enslaving you. Like it's really pretty damn close to the same thing. And I think for the people that are suffering under that, largely feels the same. So I guess long story short, absolutely inhumane, deeply disturbing. But I mean, I want us to stop doing that shit here too.
Right. Some of the people that I talk to, I do a little prisoner outreach kind of thing, and like I hear some of the numbers that they get, and I think 23 cents was the highest one I've heard.
Yeah.
And the jobs are not fun. One more thing on this North Korea situation is I think it's pretty cool hearing the South Korean government really trying to intervene on behalf of the North Korean people. They have a whole, like, they call it the Ministry of Unification. So they're actively trying to, I don't know, break down the DMZ, I guess, to put it in a way. But
yeah.
Oh, I think there's that group of people who want to go back to the reunified peninsula, reunified Korea. So, like, I mean,
a lot
more
of them
power
do.
to them, man. I, in my opinion, I'd love to see more peaceful resolutions to shit like this. So, more power to them and their dreams.
When I was there, I was stationed there in around like 2009, 2010, that time frame, and every single Korean person I met was 100% open to reunification.
Yeah.
Most of them actively wanted it. At like the worst case, in like the younger demographic, was like, well, if it happens, I would like that, but if it doesn't, I mean, like, I guess we're okay. I feel really bad for them, though. We should try to help them. They consider themselves to be one country, just who's in charge of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they look at each other like relatives, like they're our long lost cousins or something.
And aren't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly.
Okay.
From the mouths of babes. I mean, I feel that way about fucking all of these trans-border standoffs, and again, there's like there's a strong through line to both of the other hotly contested regions that we're talking about, whether we're talking about along the AFPAC border or between Gaza and Israel, and it's a crying fucking shame that so much of the conversation gets boiled down to the interests of nations, and that I think the better stars of these actual people really get lost. Because I think that your experience is probably a really common one, Leo. I think when you talk to most people in these regions, they don't have this vested interest in maintaining these borders and these divisions and these
the false dichotomy of which side are you on.
And this commitment to violent conflict, just maintaining a violent status quo that goes on without end, forever and ever and ever. The people that actually live in these places don't actually support that.
So along that line, I was in Las Vegas once doing something. I was attending a fight in 2017. I was in an Uber, like me and a couple of friends, and we were all, obviously it's Vegas, we were a little tipsy. And it turns out that our driver, I was sitting in the passenger seat. The driver he's Israeli, from Israel, and he, had moved here not too long ago. My friend, one of my friends being the fantastic joker that he is, he's like, "Oh, you're Israeli. Oh, Leo here, he's a Palestinian, and he does not support the two-state solution."
Oh my God.
And, my eyes like shot out of my head. I was like, "Oh my God, what the fuck have you done? He's gonna kill me now. Are you kidding me?" But
I feel like that's roughly the same vibe you felt at the Fountain Hills Republican
the
Club.
Schweiker fucking rally. Yeah, it was.
Oh my God!
But what was really touching was that he said, like, "I don't either, but not in a violent way. I want us to live in harmony together because we both have an ancestral claim to this land. There's no reason that they should be kicked out." So that was really nice.
And that is like also factually true.
Yeah,
at this point,
they do.
Like you, and it's also possible for like many people to have ancestral claims to common land, and for that not to be necessarily a point of contention, because cohabitation is not only possible, it is inevitable. It is the direction that all society trends is towards a more diverse population sharing space, and that's actually a desirable thing. It's actually a really beautiful thing, and it is possible when you don't have interested actors from the outside agitating for continued conflict, agitating for continued violence, because they have such a huge vested interest in maintaining the power and profit that comes from keeping people alienated from one another.
I'm going to counter with
know
one
how
thing.
strong we're going to be.
I'm going to counter with one thing, that inevitably the populations will get less diverse because we're going to intermingle so much that it's not really going to be an issue anymore.
I don't know. I think at some point you still always will keep diversity of like. I think that you're thinking in terms of like genetic diversity.
Yeah,
and
like
that's not even
really.
Yeah, I don't even think that that's really what makes society diverse. It's not so much about necessarily having different genetic traits as it is having
culture.
A society where differences in cultural, differences in values, differences in sort of the way that you orient yourself towards society and still have a place in that society. Right. To me, that's sort of like more end goalie sort of
utopian.
Diversity. Yeah,
because as far as like genetics goes, like the white supremacists got something coming to them, because everybody going to be brown, like
some shade of brown
200 years from, some shade of brown a few hundred years from now. But I think the cultural differences definitely will survive.
Speaking of surviving, another awesome segue. Thank you. So there is a situation in Taiwan happening where the traditionalists who favor not unification with communist China, but they want to have like a functioning relationship so that there's no more tension kind of thing. Is they are starting to clash more with the Democratic Progressive Party, which they favor Taiwanese identity and autonomy. So they don't want to be the Republic of China anymore, like the Republic in exile. They want to be Taiwan, and that's it. So that is coming to a head. I really scrambled my brain trying to figure out how their like president, and then they have a premier, and then prime minister. It's a parliament. It's really weird. I couldn't grasp it, but pretty much everybody in the DPP wants to have their thing, have a separate identity. And all of the KMT, which is the Kuomintang, the traditionalists, they're saying that this sort of separatist talk is going to only make things worse. So that's kind of fun.
But how do you? Okay, so as an American separated from the situation by both distance and culture, let me caveat this heavily. But I just don't get. All right, so Taiwan is basically where the Republic of China.
I have a little bit of a timeline here.
Yeah, go for it, because it's where they got chased to, right?
Yes.
It's if I'm remembering, it's where General Chiang Kai-shek got chased to towards the end of World War II.
1911, the Republic of China was established, ending the imperial dynasties. And then shit was a lot of infighting, and then the Japanese invaded, and then December 7th, 1949, after the Communist Party started rising up, then the Republicans had to flee to Taiwan.
So, I think at that point, they created a separate identity, right?
Yeah, the Republic of China is on the island.
Yeah, so I mean, is the difference the Taiwanese culture that was there prior to this, and they're saying they should just go back to that? I guess I'm just trying.
They've
to
integrated with that, and they want They want that to be their identity. What has come from the Republicans who fled, and the native Taiwanese, and who seem to be cohabitating pretty well. I've never heard of anything happening between them.
Yeah, I guess that's a really nuanced and difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about it myself. Although I will say, in terms of the way that the issue is framed and reacted to within the American body politic, it is always such a strange litmus test to see where political actors come out on, preserving a democratic Taiwan. And then having pretty radically, to my mind, contradictory views about Ukraine, and then further contradictory about Israel-Palestine. So I don't know. It's I think that's kind of a larger conversation to have about what it means to grapple with foreign policy as an American.
Yeah.
Because when you talk to I've got so many friends who are European and Northern African, and one common critique I've heard from them when they come and visit the United States and turn on the news or whatever, they say it's like you're living in a completely different universe. The way that we cover news and the way that we relate facts.
I usually turn to international media just because I want to be fully informed.
Yeah. So Moises and I are both kind of classically trained Arabic linguists, and I think it is such a blessing to be able to get news about the Arab world in Arabic.
Native.
Getting
Al Jazeera
native,
Arabic.
Sure, native reporting from people who are actually there in the language and the words that they're choosing. Because you can even go to say I do BBC Arabic pretty regularly, right? BBC Arabic coverage of Middle Eastern issues is different than the BBC in English. Same thing with Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera has English language international reporting. They also have Arabic language international reporting. And it's different. It's a different editorial team. It's a different reporting team. There is translation that happens, but they're also functionally separate news agencies in many cases. So it is interesting to see how siloed our understanding of these events are when we're only looking at it through American news media. If you can even find American news media who are making a half-hearted attempt at covering international affairs these days.
Yeah, I also watch a lot of RTVE, which is Spanish from Spain, just because it's really interesting to get the EU perspective. I think that's a valid criticism that people make of us as American media consumers. Is that we're very U.S. centric. If it doesn't happen within the United States, it's not popping up on our screen unless it's a massive war or something terrible happens. We don't get that regular update of what's going on everywhere else that most Europeans and everywhere else in the world, it gets.
True to form diet is terrible as Americans.
Yeah,
to include our information diet.
Yeah,
mostly
pretty
junk.
much. Absolutely, mostly junk. Reality TV, don't get me started. But like,
Do get me started. I love some reality TV. I like my junk, man.
I know.
It's a good reprieve.
There's 2 concurrent seasons of Bachelor going on right now.
Oh, God.
Is it the Golden Bachelor? Is that the one?
Bachelor in Paradise? Yeah, it's been incredible for me.
Oh my
really
God.
love that for me.
I'm so glad I'm into sports.
I'm glad I'm not. I'd be missing out on Bachelor.
But
that's true blood sport, by the way. Not to completely derail the international discussion, but watching a bunch of 20-somethings date on an island, that is sport. I don't care who you are.
It's a game of the minds.
It's a game of somethings. I don't think it's the minds.
That's actually why I wanted to start doing this, was because I don't think that Americans in general get enough information about what's going on in the greater world, because we're not the only country on it, as I'm sure everybody should know. But
there's a lot of Americans that still to this day never
left their hometown.
Yeah, never leave their hometown, never leave their home state. Like I live in Nebraska. There's folks here who have never been outside of like Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and that's to me, you're only getting like a 0.05% of the world view. You know what I mean? Like you're not seeing enough of the world to get the perspective as a human being that maybe somebody who's traveled to Europe, Africa, Asia, has been all over the world. Like there's truly something that happens when you travel, I think, that like opens you up to a broader viewpoint.
What was the quote from Mark Twain? Like, the greatest cure for like ignorance or something is to travel.
Oh, it's to travel. Yeah.
All right, this is another slightly older one, but I feel like it's really important to remember what's going on in Ukraine, especially with Palestine, Israel popping off. Cuban men are going to Ukraine. They're being recruited by the Russian military. They are getting signing bonuses that are around $2,000, the majority of which is being sent back home. The places that the men are being recruited from have unemployment somewhere in the neighborhood of 25%, which obviously the place is fucking destitute. There's not a whole lot of opportunity there. Just really quick aside, I remember some campaign rally where Mr. Trump said that I've heard that unemployment is, I've heard 35, 36%, even some places have said it's 45, 46%. Like, dog, half of the country's not fucking unemployed right now. You fucking moron. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Havana, the government of Cuba has insists that they're not recruiting, and what makes me believe that they are arresting people. Russian recruiters are being arrested for human trafficking. Since I don't know, not sure how they work that out in particular.
This isn't the first time they've done it.
No, it's not.
So the Russians did this in the late 70s when they invaded Afghanistan. It's the Russians have had a really weird relationship with Cuba for a long time. There's Russian speakers in Cuba. There's communities of Cuban Russians because of the exchanges of people and intermarriages and stuff like that. But like, I'm pretty sure they did this in the 70s, in the late 70s, during the Afghanistan conflict. When they start running out, they go to their partner countries, and it's almost like a foreign legion.
Yeah. Hey,
You know?
poor friend, here's money. Go shoot them.
Yeah, here, poor people. Here, we'll feed you for a little while. Come shoot these people for us. And that's so disheartening. So disheartening to see people from the Caribbean dragged across the world and embroiled in a conflict that
They have nothing to do with
they're
it.
they're basically just cannon fodder. I mean, I imagine that these people aren't being provided with the best equipment, training.
Actually, that was what I wanted to comment on. The source that I got this from, that person was talking to a Cuban man that was in boot camp, and he was in his platoon, I guess. His boot camp platoon was about 120 guys. So maybe the training's a little watered down, but they're going through like the full training regimen. And other reports of Cuban men that they're already at the front lines. There's a lot of them. I can't imagine I expect they're not getting the best equipment as well, but they're not being poorly trained.
Look, I grew up in Miami, so part of me just wants to giggle a little bit as a bunch of Cuban soldiers on the front lines of Ukraine just talking shit and fucking around. But like, the realities of that are a little more, I think, scary than meets the eye, because, and this is what immediately jumps out to me, is how similar is that to the Spanish Civil War, when that conflict started
In the 30s?
escalating. Yeah, in the 30s. And then it kind of flatlined, right? So what do both sides do? They bring in foreign fighters. It's an interesting, I think, comparison to make.
And I think kind of a historical through line to what Moises is talking about, and kind of what you teed up too, Leo, is by degrees. We got to look back at, like, okay, let's ask some fundamental questions about the material conditions that have caused Cuba to have unemployment upwards of 25%.
Embargoes.
That's not just like, exactly. It's not like Cuba just has, a uniquely unemployed weather or some shit. Like, it's fucking U.S. policy decision
By design.
Yeah, by design. So this is just like happening out of nowhere. This is poverty that's being deliberately created and imposed, and then on the other end getting exploited.
Even though they have a vaccine for lung cancer, apparently.
I believe it. It's incredible what the fucking medical profession can accomplish when it isn't constantly stymied by rent-seeking behavior and profit incentives, when it's just there to make people healthier. Go figure.
So there is a similar parallel happening, like, as far as there's going to be sanction easements happening for Venezuela. It's conditional, but Maduro seems like he is going to play ball. I think the only condition that I've heard so far is that their elections need to be held by an independent commission so that they're fair and free.
That's going to be interesting.
I don't know much more about it. I was just listening to that on my way home from where I was.
It's always interesting to see like how independent election commissions actually play out. Like,
how independent are they?
Right. Like, is it independent like a U.S. consulting firm is going to be provided?
No, I believe it's third party.
That independent election, or is it UN? Okay, so if there's like a third party body that is actually
it's not going to be American. It's not going to be Venezuelan.
Mm-hmm.
One thing on Africa that I got last week in Niger, the foreign ministry has expelled all of the French contingency. They refer to the UN as having used underhanded maneuvers to try and help France keep Niger out of the UN General Assembly that was like a few weeks ago. As an aside that I thought was worth mentioning, that accreditation to the UN is held by a committee, and they don't meet until at the end of this month or beginning of next month. So why they couldn't go, they weren't accredited, but I don't know. The withdrawal, the French withdrawal, 1,500 plus troops that began on the 10th. This is all predicated on the coup in July, where the military overthrew the civilian government, and now they have a junta, whatever. And so this is a trend that's happening in the region. Mali and Burkina have also had the same situations happen, but French presence is being kicked out.
So is this just like leftover throes of colonialism? Like, I mean, to me, it's just an African nation expelling a European power.
Yes and no.
I'm really sorry to interrupt that thread, but I am going to have to take off here. I've got another engagement, but really, really awesome conversation. And I see that we've still got the entirety of
Israel,
Palestine, and the Middle East to do. Would you guys be interested in continuing this conversation tomorrow at some point?
That's fine with me.
Yeah, we can do that.
This has been super fun. I had a blast with you guys. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Yeah, of course.
It was good talking to you.
Yeah. All right. Talk more soon.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
Later, dude. Bye.
All right. So yeah, let's wrap up this bit on Niger, and we'll save the Middle East stuff for later. So it is and it isn't a leftover of colonialism. What it is, Niger was having, and other countries in the region were having a serious problem with Muslim extremists, like terrorist groups, pretty much. And France, having previously had been a colonial power over Niger, they felt obligated to help. So
it's like France.
Hey, we fucked you guys up, so like we'll help you now. Sorry.
Like, we feel a little paternal.
Yeah. But Niger, they're sick of their shit, and they don't want them there anymore.
Well, I mean, ultimately, it's up to the government of
self-determination.
So I mean, it sucks that a coup went down and shit is going the way that it's currently going. But like, in my opinion, I think the United States and other countries have had their hands in the cookie jar for too long.
Yeah.
And I think we've already kind of messed up the playing field to the point where we should just kind of step back and let things progress the way they're going to progress and stop
self-determination.
Yes. And even if that means that they determine a path that we don't like.
Right. Like if Chile wants to have a socialist president, let them.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
There is, like, down the road of cookie jars, there was a situation in Australia, but I don't know that much about it, so I know it was a vote to give the Aborigines representation in government. But
that's interesting. I'll have to look into that more.
I want to look more into that. Yeah. I know that the Australians have not been kind to the Aborigines. Like, we don't really have much of a pedestal to stand on for that because we haven't either. But there's parallels here where there is, like, the Cherokee Nation has it's like a contractually bound delegate that's supposed to be in the House of Representatives. And since the treaty was like in the 1850s or 1840s, and since that day, it still has not had the first Cherokee delegate sent to Congress. So I wanted to also look into that to give it some parallel.
How many old treaties are sitting out there that we're just shitting on every day? That are still valid, probably.
But I want to look more into that so I can speak from an educated position. So let's get ourselves out of here. Socials and contact options. The socials for Lux Media is LVX Media Net on everything. If you can't find me, I'm not on it. For contact options, you can go to progressivepatriots.us, and the contact options are there. It's an email address and a phone number. You can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text. Either way, it's anonymous, it's unattended. I'm not going to see it until I start preparing the outline for the show. So if you want to tell me I'm stupid, go ahead, and I'll just tell you that you're stupid too. Common Defense. Not an endorsement from them to us to them, but it's an organization that I really like. At Common Defense. I think Instagram is common_defense. Another one that's local to me is Vets Forward. It's Vets FWD on Instagram, and then Vets_FWD on Twitter. I'm not calling it X.
I refuse to
call it X. So, a couple of other shows that we're doing. So this is the International Progressive Patriots. We also have a domestic U.S. version. We just released our third episode. It was obviously the House Speaker shit. I didn't have the Jim Jordan vote that happened today. Kind of went as expected, though. And we discussed Israel-Palestine more in terms of from how it affects the U.S. and the U.S. human landscape. I know it's like that's really, I don't know, nationalistic or something, but it's kind of that's what that show's for. And here's where we're going to give it a lot more detail. I have a little bit of a history of it because as I was trying to put the outline together, I just didn't know enough. So I took the time to learn myself, and I'm going to make sure that anyone listening is going to learn too. We're
here to educate.
Yeah. So there's the situation starts in 1948. There's a lot of armed conflict that happens. There have been attempts at peace talks at various points in our recent history, and then there is the difficult pain points that is keeping any kind of peaceful resolution from happening. So we'll get to that on our next one. Another show that I do with my cousin, it's called Hard Shell Tacos. She and I, we grew up in very Mexican households, but we were not Mexican enough for them, not American enough for the other people. So yeah, we were like the weird kids, the outcasts, I guess. So we kind of talk about stuff like, how do you feel about shit? Mentioned boxing earlier. B-Sides Boxing is where we do all that. It's a great time. I think our most recent one, we talked over that fucking farce that was Canelo Charlo.
Oh, jeez, yes.
And there's
invite me to the next one. I'll be down.
Yeah, I'll let you know. And there's more coming up. Ultimate fucking casual. When you search for it, Ultimate Effin', you know. So there's that for MMA stuff. There's UFC 294 is coming up soon. So with all that, Moises, parting words.
Follow me at Real Mo Montalvo. You can find me at that on most of the socials. The only one I'm really using right now is Instagram. But yeah, hit me up. Love to hear from you guys. Call the number, email us. I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on some of these stories. And love you. Have a good one.
Yeah, even if it's just to give a comment or a personal anecdote, that's completely fine. I would love to hear from anybody about pretty much anything. That's going to do it for this.
Talk to us.
Yeah. That's going to do it for this international debut of the Progressive Patriots. We finally got deployed. Holy shit.
Finally.
Yep. All right. Thanks for listening.
Have a good one, everybody.